Good evening, Allen Temple Baptist Church, and all of the friends that are listening. On behalf of our senior pastor, the Reverend Dr. Jacqueline A. Thompson, we welcome you this afternoon. And I want to add a little something. Our pastor has been a leader in this community in having the church as a COVID testing and vaccination site, including the Allen Temple Arms, a senior housing project. I should say complex. So that's some real good news. So thank you for tuning in to the Allen Temple Baptist Church Theological Thursday conversation. I am Reverend Dr. Martha C. Taylor, the historian archivist for the church. This evening, we are focusing on the COVID-19 crisis in the Black community. You know, Jesus said these words, "I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly." Life, not death. Jesus did not come with a death sentence for the community. So we welcome this afternoon our three conversation partners to help us better understand COVID-19, a pandemic that has hit Black and Brown communities. We have three outstanding doctors in varying fields that will shed light not only on the vaccination, the testing, and the disparities. They will talk about areas in their areas of expertise. I'm going to begin just by introducing Dr. Donna Thompson. She is a graduate of Xavier University of Louisiana and Howard University College of Medicine. She's a pediatrician who served as Assistant Chief of Pediatrics at the Pleasanton, California Kaiser Permanente Clinic in Pleasanton from 1987 until her retirement in 2017. Dr. Thompson is a member of Allen Temple Baptist Church, serving in the music, public ministry, and health education ministries. Welcome, Dr. Donna Thompson. We have Dr. Alvin McLean, PhD. He is the Dean at the J.F. Kennedy School of Psychology at National University. Here he is a neuropsychologist by training and is co-owner of Everhome Healthcare, a medical specialty home health agency. Dr. McLean is chair of board of San Francisco Theological Seminary and chair of the Academic Affairs Committee, of Samuel D. Merritt. Welcome, Dr. McLean. Last but not least, we have Dr. Harold Orr. He received his medical degree from the University of California at San Francisco. He had a private practice in internal medicine for 18 years. And then he felt a calling on his life and went to the American Baptist Seminary of the West, where he received his Master's of Divinity and was ordained into the ministry by Dr. J. Alfred Smith, Sr. In 2015, he accepted the position as senior pastor of the Greater El Bethel Missionary Baptist Church in Richmond, and he now serves as a team physician for Vitas Hospice for the terminal ill. Thank each of you for your presence this afternoon. We're going to have a good conversation that will be of most interest to the public. You know, it was roughly 1 year ago that the first known death by COVID-19 surfaced in the United States. The death toll stands at over 1.5 million people in the United States, and America is the leading country in the pandemic. Can you believe that? More Americans have perished from COVID-19 than on the battlefields of World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War combined. COVID-19 has hit Black communities like an atomic bomb, followed by Brown communities. Families have been ripped apart. Each death has left an empty space in homes. In our homes, one side of the bed is unslept. There is an empty chair at the dining room table. There could be two or more. Holiday times are different. And when churches reopen, there will be vacant pew seats. Well, race and race disparities has a long history in the United States regarding how Black bodies have been abused, dismissed, and tortured. When it comes to health care, Black and brown people are marginalized. W.E. Du Bois said it this way. He narrowed the disparities as the color of the skin and unjust social conditions. When Black people migrated to California, they faced the same injustices here that were in the South. Black doctors could not practice in public and private hospitals. Black nurses could not receive training. And because of systemic racism, in 1926, Dr. William Watts, a Black physician, a graduate of Meharry Medical College, saw the disparities right here in Oakland. And so he didn't like the way that patients were being treated. What did he do? He stepped in and built the first Black hospital right here in Oakland on Harlan Street. Well, that's quite a feat, and a lot of people don't know because of that race problem we had, a Black hospital existed here in Oakland. And then in 1932, the United States Public Health Services conducted experiments on Black men, known as the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in Black males. The United States Health Department used blood tests, x-rays, and spinal taps to observe how untreated syphilis, or how the men would react to that. Now, these men were tricked into thinking they would have free medical care and meals, but plainly put, they were guinea pigs. So the lingering effect of Black men being used as exploratory guinea pigs has left a lasting effect of mistrust by many Blacks in the medical system. We know what happened on May 26. George Floyd was murdered. We watched for 8 minutes and 46 seconds with a knee on the neck. That murder exacerbated underlying issues that we already had. You know what I'm saying? Anxiety, high blood pressure. And in that worldwide protest of Black Lives Matter, people did not care about 6-foot distancing. But thanks be to God, that's what I say. A young Black female scientist, Dr. Kizmika Corbett, a research fellow, scientific lead person at the National Institute of Health and the development of Moderna's vaccine. We thank God for her. You know, the question that Dr. Martin Luther King posed in his epic book written in 1967, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? He said these words, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. That's what we want to talk about now. So let's open the conversation with the basic question. What is COVID-19 and how has this virus differed from the already existing coronavirus? I'll throw that out to you, Dr. Donna.
Well, the COVID-19 virus is in the category of the coronaviruses family. This particular virus was first seen, we think, in China. They're still exploring and trying to find out the exact origins of this virus. But certainly it made its way to the shores of many countries in this world and began to spread among the people. It's an easily transmittable virus through respiratory droplets, meaning through coughs and sneezes, even talking or singing. And because of that rapid spread, many people became ill quickly. So beginning in sometime in January or probably before that, we began to see the first cases. The first case was seen here in Seattle in January of 2020. And it has spread from there.
Yeah.
I'll let Dr. Orr, you may want to continue with that.
Yeah, just adding a few comments. The coronavirus itself, that class, that family of viruses is not new. And in fact, the scientists have been working in labs with coronaviruses for a number of years. What was new was this 19, and it was significantly different from any other coronaviruses they were working with, i.e., none of us had been exposed to it, which is why it had such a tremendous effect on the world population. And Dr. Thompson is right. Where did it come from? And where it's origin? We don't know yet. People say it's number 44 called it the China virus, and we're not really certain. And I'm not sure necessarily how important that is. But the thing is, the thing that connects me with what it is people were asking, how do they come up with a cure so fast? It takes years to develop a vaccine. It's because they were already working on it. And when they had figured out the DNA patterns, that's something we can explain a little bit later, it became easier for them to come up with a clinical or an approach through biochemistry and through RNA and DNA, these things that we can explain a little bit later, to use to our benefit to help protect us through a vaccination.
Wow, that's good. Dr. McLean, you want to add something to that?
I think they covered it quite well in terms of the origins of the virus.
Good. I just learned something myself. Because I've often looked at that Lysol can, and in the tiny little words, you see coronavirus. I said, wow, it's been here. Like you explained, it's COVID-19 that is different. Well, what is the benefit, might I add, of taking the vaccination? Any of you?
There are two well-defined positive endpoints for taking a vaccine that we're certain of. We're certain of this. One, those who are fully vaccinated will not get seriously ill requiring intubation in the hospital. That's one. Two, death can be avoided almost to 100% if you've gotten your full vaccination. Now, what we don't know is, can you be vaccinated and get reinfected? There's some studies that suggest that you might, but you might get reinfected, which means you could potentially spread it, but still those who have been vaccinated will not get seriously ill and will not die. And then when we talked on the other day, Dr. Thompson brought up the herd immunity. And let me try to explain what herd immunity is. If you think of a group of people, 100 people in a big circle, all come together, and the virus is out trying to get into that group. If everybody on the outside of that group has a vaccine, has been vaccinated, the virus can't penetrate to get into the people inside the circle. And so the herd, the protection on the outside protects everybody in the inside. And you hear these numbers. Some people say it's 70%, some 75%, some say 80%. But there is this number where enough people are vaccinated. And on top of that, those who have been infected get natural immunity, right? So that you combine those two numbers and the populational protection rises. So the vaccine is to prevent death and serious illness. That we know.
I sure hope a lot of people are listening in. I hope they heard you, Dr. Orr, because, I hear people, even inclusive of my family, the hesitation of saying, I don't know, I'm waiting. I'm not sure of what they're waiting for, but based on what you just said, they might be waiting for death. I don't know, which is not good. But you made it very, very, very plain. So, there are these two vaccinations out there. What is the difference between Moderna and Pfizer?
Donna, you want to take that?
Well, they're very similar. They are both based on something called a messenger RNA, which gives a message to the body as to how to mount an immune response against an influx of the virus to the body. And so it's not changing the DNA or RNA in your own body. Right. It's just a message that's sent to your body to turn on its own immune system. So we found that both of these are very highly effective after 2 doses. They're close to 95% effective in reducing severe illness, hospitalizations, and death. Right. So the new vaccine that we may be getting soon, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, is, I think, based on a small protein from the virus itself that turns on the immune response in the body. And so that it will be a single dose, and it's not quite as effective, but it's 100% effective in preventing death. So again, that's really what we want to see. Too many people have died from this disease. And the more people who are vaccinated, the fewer deaths we will have from this disease.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've covered the fact that there is a reluctance on the part of a lot of people in the community because of past history, but yet and still there are some that still think we are being used as guinea pigs. I've heard some people say, well, I'll get vaccinated if I know what the president got, and then I'll get vaccinated. Some people think that what we are receiving is not the same as what some of the political leaders are. Dr. Orr, anything on that?
The President Biden and Vice President Harris got the same shot that we're taking. They either got Pfizer or Moderna. Those are the only 2 things that are available. And Dr. Thompson is right. I think that the Johnson & Johnson, the new one, the single dose, is a game changer. That's a game changer because that means you go in 1 shot and you're finished. You're done. Now, she's right. It's not 95%. It's only about 80, 82, 85%. But the flu virus vaccine that we get every year is only 62 to 65%. So it's a lot better than what that is. And she's absolutely correct. It prevents death and serious illness in the hospital, which is what we're trying to do.
The other aspect of it is that unfortunately the virus changes and mutates, and there have been new strains of the COVID-19 that have popped up all over the world, including the United States. And some of them are again, very easily transmitted. So we're almost in what we can say is a race against time to get vaccinated before these different strains take over and cause more problems. So it's really, really important that when that vaccine is available for you to take, that you take it. So that we, again, are protected from the more serious aspects of this disease.
I think also, Dr. Donna, that there was an article that came out this morning that suggested that for the new strains, if you take the current vaccine, it's going to be effective as well. So Correct. We're not necessarily looking for a new vaccination in order to address the needs of the new strain. Everyone get out there and take the ones that are available now.
That are available right now.
Exactly.
Here's the other great thing. Here's the other great thing. When I think about this, I always think of Johnny Cochran. Because a virus is a living organism, right? It's trying to live, right? So it gets in your body and it replicates. If it can't replicate, it can't mutate. But if the more it hangs around, the more it lingers around, it's likely to mutate, which is, that's nothing new. I remember learning that in medical school, that viruses, mutate. That's what they do. And so both Alvin and Donna are on it in terms of we got to get vaccines in arms. We've got to do it. And Dr. Taylor, you're absolutely correct. The medical system and the way it has dealt with us in the past gives people a great deal of concern, alarm, and makes them vaccination hesitant, vaccination resistant. And I think we as community leaders, this is where we've got to fight to make people understand that this will save your life. And we can implore more strongly to guide people to get to the sites, get your shots, get them done. And I'm afraid of this part. I'm 74 years old. I'm afraid.
You scared, doctor? You scared?
Scared. I'm scared of it. I'm scared. So when Alameda County was dragging their feet about my getting my shot, I went over to Contra Costa County and figured out a couple of things and got my shot and got them going. And now that I've gotten it, this is kind of a sense of relief that I have, you know?
Yeah. I understand. You know, when I got my first shot, and like I said, I received my second shot this morning, but when I got my first shot, I told the doctor that was there, I said, I'd be so glad when I get my second shot so I can hug my grandkids. She put her hands on her hip and she said, we didn't say all of that. She said, I said, you mean I can't hug Terry and Carolyn and Brandon? But the fact of it is, I'm not naive and none of us are. And we want to make sure that the public is not, is that getting vaccinated does not mean that we don't continue to follow safety precautions, washing the hands, social distance, and, wear a mask. But this stress that we've been talking about, Dr. McLean, this stress, this long history of stress that has come from how we as Black people have been treated, has built up all kinds of anxiety within us. We suffer higher disproportions of high blood pressure, which is, I guess, hypertension and other matters of that. Can you speak to that in some ways, that as we go into this whole notion of shelter in place, what can we do to help the mind?
Well, I think Reverend Charlotte will pull up a slide for us to see. But one of the things we should be mindful of is that stress evolves into a number of psychological conditions. And as you pointed out, one of those conditions is anxiety. Another condition is hypervigilance, where you are just waiting for the next shoe to drop. You always on alert. Another, and that leads to that classic problem that we've all heard about, and that's PTSD.
Yes.
Post-traumatic stress syndrome, where folks are hypervigilant. They are putting out a lot of cortisol in their bodies, and all of that cortisol acts as sort of a major sort of, it's almost like a poison in your system. It results in increasing your hypertension, and it results in increasing kidney damage. It results in lots of physiological changes that are a result of that sustained sort of outpouring of cortisol from all the stress going on. The other areas where we see a lot of psychological problems as a result of the coronavirus is a sense of hopelessness.
Yes.
Is this thing ever going to stop? Am I ever going to be able to find another job? I lost my job as a result of the coronavirus. Will I ever be able to take care of my family again? That sort of sense of hopelessness. And hopelessness, of course, leads directly into depression.
Yes.
And depression is associated with another significant problem we see in the African-American community, and that is substance abuse.
Yes.
And then in some instances, the substance abuse will also lead to yet another challenge that we see, and that is domestic violence. You're sort of in the home all the time together with your children and your spouse. You have a sense of hopelessness, a sense of despair, and inadvertently something happens. You become a little violent in the home, and that results in further problems, and it results in incarceration and difficulties with police and those types of things. So we have a lot to deal with as a result of the coronavirus from a psychological perspective. But as always, there is hope. There are opportunities for us to deal with this virus and with the psychological problems that can result from that. And one of the things that we don't realize either is that the level of stress and feelings of hopelessness and despair that we see among ourselves actually is occurring also in our hospitals. The folks who are taking care of a lot of the sick folk with coronavirus are also having those same feelings as a result of what is called vicarious trauma. They're seeing the devastation of the patients, and they also experiencing anxiety and hopelessness. So this is important that we really begin to think about how can we engage in some type of self-care that's going to get us out of this dilemma. And there are a number of areas where we can sort of engage in self-care. Before we go into that, however, either Dr. Donna or Dr. Orr might want to make some comments about some of the issues from a psychological perspective.
Well, I would say this is not only affecting the adult population, but certainly our children and youth.
Absolutely.
Yes. The rates of depression and anxiety have skyrocketed because of this. And it's really important to make sure that we are not stigmatizing them for this. We're recognizing and helping them recognize that it's a natural consequence of their surroundings, their environment, what's happening to them. It's not their fault, and they're not alone. And we have to listen to them and observe changes in behavior and comments about feeling hopeless or that things are not going to change. And we have to recognize and address that as best we can to help them work through this. This is an adult and pediatric problem. And it's disproportionately affecting our Black children.
Yes.
Even more so, because often they're in conditions that are not ideal in the first place. And then to take away school, to take away the socialization, to make them concerned about where the next meal is coming from, that kind of thing. Taking on the anxieties of their parents is not healthy. And so this definitely, we have to recognize this. Dr. Orr?
Dr. McLean, can I ask a question of you? You know, as a clinician, somebody has depression and anxiety, we prescribe medications. From you as a clinical psychologist, what are some of the tools that people can use that don't involve medications that might help them get through this terrible scourge that we're dealing with?
Yes.
Absolutely. And there's some very straightforward and simple sorts of things that can be done. And Reverend Charlotte will probably put up a couple of slides to sort of identify some of those things. And given that this is a program that really is coming out of Allen Temple Baptist Church, one of the first things that I would mention as sort of a simple tool is to encourage folks to keep a journal. And sometimes a journal that just identifies what can I be thankful for? What's positive that's going on? Even a journal that may write down sort of a prayer list or a meditation list. Those very simple sorts of things can oftentimes sort of break that cycle of feeling so hopeless and feeling so much despair. Another thing that we encourage folks to do is limit the amount of time you spend listening to bad news. Don't listen to the media continuously, because that will depress you. That will give you the sense that nothing is changing and all is bad. So very systematically just limit the amount of that bad news coming into your home and into your environment. One of the things that I love to do, and that has been supported very well by the research, and that is very simply get outside, get some vitamin D. Yes. Go outside, take a walk. In fact, there's a big movement in psychology and psychotherapy and that has to do with actually walking therapy, where a therapist and a client will actually walk 6 feet apart and actually engage in psychotherapy as they're walking. It has a dual effect of increasing the biochemical changes that occur in your body as a result of walking and getting exercise. And it also has the effect of allowing you to continue to have your ongoing psychotherapy, but at a safe distance. One of the things that our pastor has mentioned many times is, let's not waste a good pandemic.
Yes, she has said that.
So what has this pandemic really brought to us? It's brought to us a real appreciation of the value of telehealth services. So a lot of people who may find a stigma associated with going to see a psychiatrist or psychologist in a therapeutic setting, if you are doing that via Zoom in the privacy of your own home, you may be more likely to actually engage in psychotherapy if it's right there available to you in that setting. So take advantage of the telehealth services that are available to us at this time. There have been a lot of changes in the laws associated with the requirements for telehealth services to make it much easier. So let's engage in something that will make it simple. You won't have to leave or find a babysitter, but you can still get the psychotherapy you need. So those are very simple sorts of things that sometimes are not so intuitive, but they are right there available for us.
You know, you bring up some wonderful, literally remedies for depression that's not costly. I know, just as a person living alone, I'm used to being by myself, so that part of social distancing is not that new for me. But what has helped tremendously during this pandemic is just a closer relationship with God, in terms of, like you said, you journal, reading the Bible, and just reinforcing what you said in terms of staying away from bad news. Dr. Donna, you were talking about young people and the impact that this COVID-19 is having on them. And more so, it's that being inside, having to be sheltered in place. Yes. And I heard just most recently, speaking of listening to bad news, is that there is an increase in suicides among young people. I'm not saying that increase is among a Black youth. It does not matter. Just if young people are taking their life, that's not good. Have you?
Yes, unfortunately, that is true. There has been an increase in suicides among youth during this pandemic. But as Dr. McLean was saying, that outside activity is so helpful. It's helpful for children as well. We're blessed in California to have good weather most of the year. And so parents and caregivers should, as much as possible, try to get their kids outside and out in the air to run around, run off energy. And older youth and teens, walking for them also is important. Mm-hmm. But kids also need a way to socialize as well.
Yes.
And we should encourage healthy socialization, not so much in their rooms and on Instagram constantly, but somehow some social distance socialization where they can talk. And even if it's facilitated by another adult, is just so helpful. And getting out there, getting that vitamin D is going to be helpful in the long run.
Well, you bring up a great point. And when we talk about socialization, we talk about the number of hours that children nowadays have to spend on the computers. It wasn't but a while back they were saying how bad it was to be on you know, using your iPads, your iPhones, and et cetera. Now that's gotten to be.
That's still true.
Exactly. True. But they have to go to school. So, you know, they're torn between what they have heard and what they're having to do. Yes. That's got to be a form of trauma in itself.
It absolutely is. And in areas where internet is not easy to access and children are struggling to get online to even get their studies done, that increases anxiety as well. Mm-hmm. But the online time has been what they've had to do. They haven't had a choice. So I'm praying that we continue to, the school districts and the legislators continue to work together to try to get kids back to school as soon as possible and as safely as possible. It's so essential that they have that face-to-face contact versus always on the computer itself.
Exactly. You know, Dr. McLean, you were talking about some of the mental impacts that people go through. And I think about, it happened this year, but it's all in that arena of the pandemic. We look at the virus in itself that's taken family members out. That's stress. We look at what happened when we had the Black Lives Matter movement. It ratcheted up after the deaths of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, Blacks have to deal with that. There are so many other young people, and particularly their lives have been lost due to systemic racism that's been compounded by police brutality. And then when we see in some homes the empty nest of parents, you know, where was it? In Richmond, we saw a relatively healthy looking couple. They both ended up passing away from, the COVID-19 virus. We talked about ways we can be healthy, but then there's that reality of just dealing with death, not having I don't even want to say luxury, but just the breach in our traditions of not being able to say fare thee well to our loved ones. The camaraderie that we get from church members, that has had a major impact. Yes, we've gone to what we call online, communication as it relates to church service, but that's not the same. Dr. Orr, you also work with the terminally ill. Tell us about, if you don't mind sharing, some of your experiences that you have had directly with families, where there has been that moment when the last breath was taken, but they weren't even around.
We were less knowledgeable about the spread of the virus, and everybody was real afraid. Nursing homes locked down, board and care facilities locked down, assisted living facilities locked down. And at one point, I had difficulty as a physician entering these places. Eventually, if I showed a recent test, a negative test within the past week, they would let me in to see a particular patient. Sometimes they would isolate me and the patient in a certain part of the facility. The tragic thing, and you touched on it, Dr. Taylor, you touched on it, when the families can't get there. They can't hold them. They can't be comforting. And for them towards the patient, and the patient telling them it's okay, it's all right. Now, recently, there's been somewhat of a loosening of that. And that if I, as a physician, a hospital physician, say, Mr. Jones is actively dying, and within the next 24 to 48 hours, he or she will be gone. They will let the families in. They're starting to let the families come in and be closer to them. But the other part of it, as you touched on as well, the funerals are different. You don't get to grieve in the communal way that Black people like to grieve. And so all of that is missing. And I think that Dr. McLean has touched on, I'm not sure what the long-term effects of that are going to be. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, what will it be down the road that grandma died and I didn't get the chance to see grandma and tell her goodbye? How do you know grandma's there? Explain that whole process to me. So it has impacted, and as a pastor, you know, I had to deal with it. And as a doctor, I have to deal with it. And my sources, I go to scripture. You know, I just go to scripture and I talk about the physical body and the spiritual body and the heavenly body and try to make sense of it. But it's challenging, Dr. Taylor. And I don't have any quick answers for it. And I don't think anybody else does. We've not been here before in this setting. And it certainly has had a tremendous impact and will have a tremendous impact, I think, for a long time.
I believe you're right.
We don't know what the long-term impact is going to be on children as well.
Yeah,
I really fear that the consequences of this last year are going to be with us for a long time and with those children.
Remember Dr. Thompson, when we were in training and they talked about the 1919 epidemic and they talked about post-influenza syndrome, you know, people had Parkinson's disease and all that kind of stuff. We have no idea what the long-term effects of this thing are going to be. I agree with you. I think that in both children and adults, we're going to see some long-term neurological consequences that we had not considered or taken into account.
Well, we are seeing that already, the so-called long haulers.
Long haulers, right.
Who had infections who continue to have symptoms months and months later with headaches and GI upset and meaning nausea, vomiting, brain fog. They can't concentrate.
Right.
And adults and children are complaining about that. So that's another reason to get these vaccines. Because even having a mild case can result in having symptoms for months and months and months. And that is another stress and anxiety that has to be dealt with for both children and adults.
Kind of living in the unknown.
Yep.
Yes, we are.
Right.
But again, let us not lose the opportunity to learn from this, because one of the things that I think we need to always be mindful of, and that is Black people are resilient.
Yes.
We've gone through many challenges in our 400 years here in this United States. And one of the things that I oftentimes wish we could do more of is actually do more research, understanding what is it about us that helps us to be resilient. Can we help others to be more resilient based on our own experiences? So I think everyone is absolutely correct. We're going to see some long-term devastation, but this is really a rich opportunity to learn how can we deal more effectively with resiliency, and how can we learn from people who do it well, what's going to make a difference.
I think some of that is our history of our faith.
Yes,
just the faith that we have carried for centuries from Mother Africa to the shores of the United States and through these years of adversity. Just our deep and abiding faith has been unshakable in a lot of cases. So that's one aspect of our resiliency, I'm sure.
I believe you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Another thing that puzzles me, two things. One, why can one person be infected from the same source, get deathly ill and die, and the other person gets it and may have no symptoms at all? Right? What's in there? What's happening that allows that to happen? Two, what happened to the flu? What happened to influenza A and influenza B? that we got, most of it, not everybody, got their shots for. We haven't
Masks.
Where is it? What happened to it?
Masks did that, I think.
You think it was masks? You think what it is? You think it was masks?
Yeah.
Could very well have been. But we haven't seen it. This is like the height of it right about now.
Yeah, fewer colds as well.
Yeah.
The regular common cold. Fewer.
And in 1917, you know what they had? They had masks. That's what they used then. It was masks.
They did.
Wow. This is a very, very interesting question, but all of you have brought up something, because we're all people that have a strong religious background. And we talked about survivors. We have come through so many dangers, and we can't even say unseen. We have seen so many dangers. We've been the victims of so many different kinds of torture and just plain right out mistreatment. And the importance of having a solid relationship with God has so much meaning. It's medicinal, it's healing. It provides us that hope that when we think that everything has gone wrong, God steps in. And I think, as it's been stated, not just by us, but the pastor, don't waste a good pandemic. Don't waste a good opportunity to have a closer relationship with God. Yes. So when people, Dr. McLean, look back and they study what caused us to be survivors, what was unique, we have an inordinate amount of faith that many other ethnicities don't have. That's all we had. That's all we had. We couldn't go outside of the confines of where we were being abused. But what we knew was that God was with us, Emmanuel with us. And to me, as we talk about this, it's an opportunity to stress the faith and a good relationship with God. Pastor,
you preach it.
This is the kind of thing.
Amen.
When Dr. McLean said the words first, he said, this hope, it makes you want to rise up out of your seat, because it's not dead. There's something better around the corner. And I have to reiterate this again. And then, Pastor, you take it from here. Who came up? A Black female.
Yes.
The leader in developing this vaccine.
Yes.
God uses the least to get the most out of us.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to run away. So, we're talking about healing.
Yes.
We're talking about healing the body. We're talking about healing the mind.
Yes.
We're talking about environmental healing.
Yes.
Doc, come on back to us.
I was just thinking, he's never condemned us or forsaken us. I mean, somebody said, well, where is God in this? I said, God is right here.
He's
All
right.
you got to do is call on him and have faith that it was the same way I thought about with number 44, with Trump, number 45, I wasn't concerned about it. I said, watch how God handles it. Just the way God handled Nebuchadnezzar and everybody else, every other leader who thought they were bigger and stronger than God. This thing that we are dealing with, she's right. Don't lose the opportunity to reestablish or establish your relationship with God.
Yes.
And having that hope, knowing that joy will come in the morning.
Yes.
That when I'm at my lowest, that I can still know that my God loves me, my God will be with me, and my God will carry me through this, you through this, and all the rest of us through it, without any question, consternation, or uncertainty about it.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, amen on that.
Amen.
But you know what? We know that. And I believe that there is I'm not going to say half and half, but there is a good majority of our listeners, our Allen Temple family, that knows that. Sometimes in the midst of despair, we need to hear a word. I just need to hear a word. And we need that reinforcement that the pandemic is not the first and it's not going to be the last.
That's right.
So we have to call on that strength that helps us to persevere and to get through. So the mental health aspect, Dr. McLean, as you have aptly pointed out, is so very, very important to us in healing. It's something about people that have longevity in their lives. I mean, I'm talking chronologically about age, and you ask them, well, what kept you here? And you hear so many of us say, nothing but a God.
Yes.
And so I think that when we get that close relationship with God, we are survivors. We'll get there. How do we help some of our family members who may have a problem with really understanding if God is so good? We know that's the theodicy question. Where is God? I mean, if he's so good, why would he let all of this happen? God is in control. Any of you don't have to be a minister in terms of ordained to answer that. We can answer that from the innate experience we have in the knowing of who God is to us. Someone comment on that, if you don't mind.
I think being an example yourself, you're modeling faith, you're modeling prayer, and trying to, and it doesn't mean that you're never down, that you're never stressed, but you recognize that stress and you say, okay, there's something to this. There's somewhere I can go. I can go to God in prayer. Sometimes you can't talk to other people. Sometimes it's an intercessory prayer that you do for another person, and you pray that God intervenes in that person's life. Sometimes that's what it takes if you cannot reach them yourself.
And I look back over my life and say, where has God brought me from? What has he brought me through? And always, right there, even when I wasn't assured that what my relationship with God, what it really was. But when I know I couldn't have done that, God did that. Now, if I can trust him with this, with my unknown, I can certainly trust him with this and know that his joy for me is greater than anything I can even conceive of. Even conceive of. And I think we have to reinforce, Dr. Alvin said it, there is hope. There is so much hope. But to get that hope, you need some vaccine in your arm. So you're not.
Absolutely.
You have to have some hope in Jesus Christ and that vaccine, too.
That's right.
I gave science as well. He gave us that, too.
That's right. That's right.
The cognitive wherewithal to know what to do.
That's right.
I think one of the things that helps me tremendously is the ability to release control and give it over to God.
That's beautiful.
There are definitely things we cannot control.
That's right.
And our presumption that we can oftentimes gets us into trouble.
Right.
If we can get to the point where we can release the control and be comfortable with those things that we can control and just say, the rest of it, I give it over to the Lord, makes a world of difference in how you approach your day-to-day functioning.
Absolutely. That's good stuff.
That's healing in itself when you turn it over to the great physician. You know that? Knowing, as you said, we don't have control. So why worry about what you cannot control? Let go and do what? Let God. That's what we have to do, because worry will not do anything but lead to, further anxiety.
Yeah, precisely. But Donna is absolutely correct, because when you worry, it just engages in that ruminative behavior. And rumination is one of the key psychological triggers for that outpouring of cortisol. And it really does, that leads to so many damaging aspects to your physiology.
If you're a diabetic and that cortisol is flowing, your diabetes gets out of control, your appetite gets out of control, It's a vicious, vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So God is in control, but we have some control. We have a lot of control, as a matter of fact. We control of how we respond. We may not can change the environment, which we can't, but we can change the way we respond to what is going on around us. Mm-hmm. This is a good conversation. We could keep it going. And thank God for Dr. Fauci. We thank God for the Black church that helped to change the dynamics of the political arena so that we have someone in there that cares. It was sad, but also a point of just relief to see our president, our vice president, holding a ceremony, just honoring the fact that they know that people have died from this. They can't do it all, but they are there trying to do their best. So we thank God for a change in the political administration in those terms. I want to say that as we prepare to close, if you have a last word, and then we're going to close with Terrell Nelson. We like to have a young person as part of our conversation in this. Now, she may not say anything other than a poem, but we want to highlight. That's one of the beautiful things about Allen Temple is that we really shine the light on our young people. She is a senior at Bishop O'Dowd School in Oakland. She loves poetry. She loves designing clothes. And I can remember when Terrell was a little girl and she would see me at church and I would be there through the week and she and I would, be around the pulpit sometime and I would see her run up there and she would peer over and she said, when I preach, will they say, uh-huh? And I said, yes, baby, they just might. I say that to say this, not as a joke, but she's a young lady that loves the Lord. And as we close with these words, let me just say, Jesus Christ said this, peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. Not as the world gives you. Don't let your hearts be troubled, good people. And don't be afraid. And for now, we're going to turn it over and hear the voice of a young person. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name's Terrell Nelson. I am Dr. Taylor's granddaughter, and today I'm going to be talking about COVID-19 and some of the effects that it's had on me personally. So, in March 2020, I don't think anybody could have expected that COVID would last as long as it's been lasting. I know for me and many of my friends in my inner circle, we expected it to be over by the time the next school year started or even by the summertime. And it was just really surprising and it was a hard time to go through having all this social interaction to having literally zero to none. And now, me being a senior, I can say that COVID couldn't have come at a worse time. I missed out on a lot of senior activities, and not just the activities, but for me socially, being able to interact with people, that just gives me energy, and I just thrive in those types of environments. So it was a really drastic change, and not even just friends, family too. I haven't been able to hug my grandma since March, even though we've seen each other here and then. We haven't hugged. Some family gatherings that would have been annual, such as New Year's Eve, Christmas, things like that. We didn't really get to do a lot of that stuff. And another thing about senior year, it is a time of transitioning. And I feel like I missed out on that. And a lot of people who I know personally have missed out on that. And going past that, I just think the way that COVID-19 was handled, it could have been handled a lot differently. I don't know. As a young person, I feel like sometimes people can be selfish. Like, people do things for selfish reasons, Oh, I'm just going to go to this party. It'll be okay. Meanwhile, there's like 50-something people there who might have COVID. We don't know. But stuff like that just kind of keeps going on in the back of my head when I think about it. I'm about to graduate in May, and as of now, I don't even really know what my graduation is looking like. So when you talk about COVID, I'd say it's just like thinking bigger than yourself. I know I've talked about me as a senior, but I know family who are well in their 50s or older who have lost people. I've lost some people, so on and so forth. So I would say it's a pretty big deal. I feel like at this point, I don't know. I want it to be over with, but I feel like we'll get through it. Prayer, meditation, just good energy, and listening to CDC guidelines. I think that's the biggest part now. So